Welcome everyone. I hope everyone can hear us loud and clear. If there are any problems, please drop us a message on the chat. That we much appreciated. So, good evening everyone, and warm welcome to our very first panel discussion of 2024. My name is Alicia, and I am honored to represent Project Controls Expo Australia. Before we delve into what promised to be enlightening and insightful webinar, I would like to take a moment and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. We pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and Aboriginals elders of other communities who might be here today. Project Control Expo is a globally recognized event for leading the development and continuous advancement of project controls as a profession. Last year, together with Engineers Australia, Australian Cost Engineering Society, we started the initiative to support women in project controls, and we continue to working together. Without further ado, I am thrilled to kickstart our discussion and welcome our first speaker, Abhi Datta. Abhi, over to you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thanks so much. And as Alicia said, that it would be an enlightening session. Just wanted to give you a brief highlight onto why we are into this, right? And of course, International Women's Day has already happened, but we are catching up a bit late. And that gives us the opportunity to reflect on what has been discussed in the media and also think this through, right? And this whole month, we'll be reflecting on this and probably we'll be taking some actions going forward. I welcome you on behalf of Engineers Australia, Australian Cost Engineering Society. So I took the role of National Chair Exec Committee last year. And one of the major remits that we have is to grow our female participants in the society and within Engineers Australia. And as project professionals, project controllers, we love to look at data. So I'm just looking at few data points here. So if you look at the Civil Engineering Society, for example, which is highly correlated with the major projects representation as well, the female participation is about 12%. If I now look at Australian Cost Engineering Society, the body of project controls within Engineers Australia, it's about 10%. So we have 10% of female members. Now, there's also an interesting data table that was published by PMI a couple of years back, which gives the split of people in program management, project management within different sectors. So if I look at, so it covers sectors like healthcare, training, education, financial services, and last but not the least, construction. So if I look the split, construction is pretty much bottom of the table at 13%. Now that pretty much tells me that we have to do something about it. And hence we have got an esteemed panel today. And I'm sure we'll have a lot to learn from that. And, saying that, I would pass it over to Dennis, who would moderate this session tonight. Thank you, Dennis.
All right. Thank you very much, Abhi, for that. And yes, I think I found a quote somewhere along the line when I was also considering the fact that Women's Day is past. And I thought it was very telling. The quote was, not just a day, but a movement. And, I think it's important to remember that. It's not just the big flashy day with the flowers and everybody makes an acknowledgement of what we said last year and the year before. And I think before the panel started, we even talked about 10 years ago and lists that were put together. But it is a movement and it is something. And I certainly hope we are making progress along the way. But rather than hearing from me, the plan is that I'll ask each of our panelists to give us a brief introduction and bit about yourselves by way of biography. I think we had a question that says that you have to finish that with one thing why you are here is the question. And then once we've done all of that and everybody knows who everybody is, we'll come back to probably 3 or 4 themes that we'll be discussing for the remainder of the 45 minutes. And one is disease low representation that Abhi refers to. Is it a question of desire or is it awareness? I'll ask each of our panelists to talk in more detail about the personal stories, what has influenced them, what has helped them get to where they are today. And third, we'll bring out some of those famous obstacles that the roadblocks that seem to be in the way all the time, preventing us from getting where we want to be. And then, of course, the inevitable and the obligatory call to action. What do we have to do to actually turn this dial that it's just not the same again next year when we sit down or the year after? So, and we'll encourage questions at the end. There's an allocation of time for questions, and we encourage everybody to be thinking about those questions throughout the process. So if I could start by, I think we had it in an order. I tried to figure out what the order was when we had them on the screen, but I couldn't. So I'll ask Kestrel to start, and then I'll work my way around the order that we had initially. So Kestrel, over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. And good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here talking about women in construction, which from my point of view is always women in project management. That is my career and my passion. I am the CEO of Elemental Projects, which is a capability uplift firm. So we do a lot of training and work with organisations around culture and whatever it is that they need to do their projects better. We're a registered training organisation, so a lot of that is accredited training around the Diploma of Project Management. But I do actually wear a few other hats as well. I am a board member for the Global Alliance for the Project Professions, an international standards group focused on project and program management. I sit on the Industry Advisory Board for the University of Sydney, where I've lectured in the Masters of Project Management for about 6 years. And I've had a really long and wonderful association with the Australian Institute of Project Management, AIPM, and that I think is maybe the most relevant because for a couple of years I was the head of Women in Project Management for the Institute and developed a 10-point plan for how we might support women in project management, a lot of which is women in construction.
Okay, and the one thing why you are here, I think, is the obligatory question at this point.
I'm here because I really love and think it's so important that we have conversations. And Abhi and I are part of a monthly conversation around project leadership and the challenges in that sector. I think that's how we make progress. Just keeping the conversation going, and anything that that supports women is something I'm going to get behind as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Anastasia, I think over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. So Anna Bassanova, I come from a finance background, which also similar to the construction industry has its own gender complications. So I am a principal with Queensland Investment Corporation. We invest in a lot of assets, a lot of real assets, including real estate and infrastructure. I sit within our infrastructure division, and as part of my job, I also sit on the boards of companies like Port of Melbourne and Northwest Roads Group, which are M7 and Westconnex in Sydney. And as part of our essentially shareholding in the assets, construction is one of the major parts of businesses. For example, at Northwest Roads Group, we're currently in the middle of M7 widening construction, and at Port of Melbourne, we're considering construction of a new container terminal. Maybe preempting, Dennis, your question why I'm here, I think I would love to be in a position using the conversations and discussions to drive change. And given from the supply chain perspective, we are connected from the investment industry and construction industry. I think we have the great opportunity to work together to drive that change on a consolidated basis. So hopefully it can be tangible and achievable.
All right, thank you. Let's see, number 3, Kelly, over to you.
Thanks, everybody. I must declare that I don't have a career in construction. So my career, though, has largely been spent in male-dominated STEM industry. So I did start off as an engineering officer in the Royal New Zealand Air Force and stayed in defence and aviation for about 25 years before finally landing here at Ausgrid. Excuse me, and I have watched as our industries and workplaces have worked to become more diverse and effectively value a wide range of perspectives. But my current role is Group Executive at Transmission, Development and Growth here in Ausgrid, where I've got the pleasure of leading Ausgrid's capital projects team. And we're also actively pursuing options for Ausgrid to participate in the development of the renewable energy zones in New South Wales and also other renewable energy options as part of the transition to net zero, which is something that I'm very passionate about. But the reason I'm here is really my other passion, which is I am a strong believer that women should have the same opportunities as men. And I came back I did have a little hiatus out of engineering, out of the STEM world, and I came back in because I wanted to make sure that there were role models in STEM for women, and if I could either make it better for one woman who was already in STEM to stay in STEM, or to encourage one more woman into a STEM career, then I felt that I would have achieved something worthwhile in my career. So that's why I'm here today.
Excellent, thank you. Rebecca, last but not least, and it's not because you don't have the background.
Thanks, Dennis. Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of the event this evening. Rebecca Pickering. I have recently actually left Inland Rail, so one of Australia's largest mega projects, a $30 billion freight rail line connecting Melbourne and Brisbane, very exciting project to be part of. And I was with that project for 5 years, the last 2.5 as chief executive. I've and then prior to that, had quite long career in various different sort of industries, mostly energy related, working on very large construction projects, including things like coal seam gas and other industries as that, energy industries generally. Since I've left Inland Rail a number of months ago, I've moved into doing coaching and mentoring of senior executives. And that's a bit of a segue into the kind of whole, why I'm here, because I still feel very connected to the construction industry and want to really support any executives, but women in particular, thrive and reach their capability there. And I think it is important, that by participating in these events, I'm able to share some of my stories of my time in the career, when I was sort of more at the front line in those leadership roles in the construction industry, the experiences I had, the enjoyment I got, and the satisfaction I got as being part of the industry. And I guess trying to create and maybe empower others, to consider, the pathways, that I've had the fortune of going through myself.
Okay, thank you. So maybe now we'll combine those first 2 points, because I think they are very much related. Is when we look at all those statistics, and I mean, everywhere you look, it's grossly out of kilter. It's unbalanced, and is that because STEM careers themselves aren't attractive to women? Is it a lack of awareness of the opportunities? These aren't desirable careers? So maybe if I could do the same order again and ask you to talk about that and give us a little bit of your story, how you wound up to be here, and what were the significant things that got you in and carried you through the journey, if you will. So Kestrel, I think you're back up.
Thank you. Look, I have spent most of my career in male-dominated industries, and I have this thing called the flicker test. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but it's where I go into a client head office, and if I go to the bathroom and the lights flicker on when I open the door, I know they've got a gender problem because it's been so long since someone else was in there. So defence has been, you know, that's where I really cut my teeth as a corporate trainer in defence industry and construction, engineering, and even in, you know, I think the more senior your groups are, the more you tend to be the only woman in the room. And I was often the youngest person in the room, but I never felt disrespected. I always felt listened to, and so I really I didn't really get it until I had kids. And then I was like, oh, right, here we are. These are the barriers now. And at that point, that's when I volunteered to take on the role of leading women in project management. Because, and I've got in front of me a recent study done by the University of Sydney looking at women in the workplace. And I thought I might just share just one small bit of it, because I think it goes to why do women, what might draw them more into these sectors. And it says, when asked about a range of job attributes, women placed most value on having a job where they would be treated with respect. And I think that, you know, engineers and people who build things and do these big jobs are treated with respect. So tick, yep, that would satisfy it. The job was secure. You could argue, yeah, there's job security. It paid well, definitely. Was interesting for sure, and offered flexibility. And that's, I think, the bit where we really struggle. It's certainly the barrier that I saw at Whipham. It was being able to pick up the kids and manage the work-life mush, as I call it. I don't think it's a balance. That's too neat a word. I think it's a mush, everything kind of thrown in together. And I think we just don't need to not shy away from the challenge. The question of who inspired me, there are so many professional women in my career who've inspired me, but I wanted to give a call out to my grandma, because when she got pregnant, so she had a degree in economics and history, and then got a job as a teacher in a New South Wales school. And when she got pregnant, in accordance with the policy of the time, she was fired. So she wasn't allowed to work, and she wrote to the minister and set out why that was not right, and had her job reinstated. And for herself and everyone else who came after that, the policy was changed. So I do think we can absolutely make these changes. Some of the times it's just really being clear about what the problem is and having a crack, you know, just trying some things, experimenting until you find something that helps.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it is draconian when you think back to those days and the things that happened, and you know, you shrug and you can't believe that such a thing could have happened. Okay, Anastasia, I think over to you.
Yes, sure. It's a hard act to follow, and I'm not sure something can compare, Crystal, to your grandma. I think I would totally also agree with you in relation to respect throughout my career, that working in Australia, I haven't encountered that, but I had experience working in other geographies, including the US, and actually weirdly US, even though being Western country, I did encounter much more bias there versus Australia, which in contrast made me realize that there are still a lot of hurdles for women globally. And another huge differentiation in my career was that I was extremely lucky to have some of my managers as women, which has been such a push ahead, because in many situations I didn't have to explain my requests. Because if your manager is a woman, you don't need to over-explain yourself. And it helped a lot to progress. It helped a lot to ask for things, because sometimes policies we have within our corporations follow us, we create them, and it helped to ask things which are not included in our policies, and those would get approved. As also Kestrel mentioned, the flexibility point, that is critical, but that flexibility is critical also not just for women, but for it to exist for men as well. And the example of parental leave, of it being available for both primary and secondary care, is one of the great pushes that will take us to the next level. And sorry, Dennis, I think I'm going a little bit ahead in the agenda there. Importance of role models and mentorship. That is also critical, to have people who can vouch for you and people who you can run your ideas by.
All right, I'll forgive you for that. And Kestrel, I forgot to tell you that I also did the flicker test for you today. I ran out of a board meeting and didn't pay any attention, and I stood there and said, "Where are the urinals?" The lights were on. I was in the wrong toilet. Fortunately, it was only me, so I got out of there very quickly. But at the office I'm at, the lights were on. So,
Good.
Okay, Kelly, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. So I think the question about desire or awareness, if I'm honest, I'm not sure. I think I didn't really know what the big wide world had in store from a career perspective when I was at high school. Similar to Kestrel, though, I had my mother who her brothers went to university, but she didn't go to university, but I think she always had the capability to go to university. So from a very young age, I knew that I wanted to go to university, and I knew that I wanted to do a job. I wanted to do a degree that resulted in a job, you know. So my mum was actually an accounts clerk, so she was an accounts clerk. She did accounts. My dad was a builder, so he was a carpenter. He did building. So I thought, well, I was good at numbers and I was good at science, so I'll do engineering and I'll be an engineer. So it wasn't really much more in it. I didn't really have any awareness of what I was stepping into. I'd been at an all-girls school, and so then when I went into engineering school, for my first year, I was one of 8% pursuing electrical engineering at the time. Then I joined the military, and again, I was one of 8% female officers in the New Zealand Air Force, but I was one of only 3% engineering officers in the military. So I don't think I knew, if I'm honest, what I was stepping into. So the desire stemmed from wanting a good career and wanting to do something that was interesting, much as what Kestrel read out. So I think awareness is, I think you get more awareness as you go into the working world and you start talking to people and you understand, you know, how much of the business accountants or financial managers understand, and you understand that lawyers aren't just baristas in a court, but actually, again, understand business and the way that a business operates. So I think I was probably pretty naive going choosing my career path, but it's been great. And much like Rebecca said, I think the opportunities that I've had in my career have been really good. Mine has probably I started a little bit earlier, maybe than Anna. There was, you know, I started in the military where there was still some posters on the walls that weren't just page 3 posters, but maybe a little bit more explicit. And so there were a number of barriers that I had to break down, and it takes a lot as a young person to find your voice in some of those situations. I'm obviously much better now because I have much more experience. So I think there's research today, right, that says, I think the last one I read was in about 2021, that said of 12,000 Australian STEM students, female STEM students, found that they were confident, if not more confident, in their problem-solving skills, their goal directing, and their occupational mobility, right? But I think the conclusion is, as men continue to dominate STEM programs, women are enjoying less career success, facing greater hurdles, and suffering much higher attrition rates. So for me, it's about, I go back to that. I don't think it's necessarily desire or awareness. I think if we can encourage awareness, I think the desire will come. based on the fact that it can be a very rewarding career once you're in.
Okay, thank you. I think that's something that I'd like to come back to after Rebecca has your opportunity. You talk about people leaving the industry and dropout rates and things like that, and maybe talk a little bit more about that, your perspectives from each of you when we come back. But I think, Rebecca, it's your turn to take the mic.
Sure, thanks, Dennis. Look, I guess by way of background, I although I'm an engineer by qualification, I've never really worked, as what I would describe as an engineer, doing detailed design, engineering calculations, sort of truly technical work. But I've always worked with engineers because I realized fairly early on that engineering pursuits were those that I found most exciting. I really wanted to be part of the legacies that these projects brought. But I realized that my strengths were more in supporting engineers get done what they needed to get done, build a bridge or build a refinery or a road or whatever it was. And maybe designing that road or whatever was not what I was super good at. But I was really good at helping engineers explain what they were doing to the community. I was good at talking to landowners. I was good at talking to governments. I was good at talking to shareholders. And so somehow I found my way in that industry, not maybe on the super traditional single ladder that you sometimes think of, a very technical ladder, but I always loved being part of the industry for what it gave you in terms of a reward and sense of sort of achievement and pride of what you were delivering. And I was always really fortunate that, I had some, senior female role models to follow and encourage me, and also some absolutely fantastic sponsors, and in particular, a number of guys who saw the complementary skill set I had and how I fitted into construction, and not necessarily with that sort of stereotypical engineering role, but in roles that are so critical to getting engineers and their pursuits over the line. That's really how I found it. Actually, I just wanted to mention, Kestrel, your story about your grandma. If you haven't read the book Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. I think it's a really great book about exactly what happened to women that era when they became pregnant and had to give up their technical careers. And for everyone online, a brilliant book. It's and it just makes you think how far we have come. But in terms of barriers, I was probably there weren't a lot of women often working on the projects that I was, particularly in the early days. And so I was often a bit of a trailblazer. I was sort of left to my own devices to forge a way to find my way through maternity leave and things like that. And for that, I am grateful. It was, I think there weren't barriers put up in my way. It's just probably that often there weren't rules and anything to navigate. So it gave me some freedoms. But I think just summing up, for me, it's a truly exciting sort of career path in engineering, and there are so many opportunities to be part of construction, and I think we need to value the skill set that women bring, which is often that leadership, communication. Again, I don't want to stereotype, but there is plenty of room for women to get involved in the industry.
Can I piggyback off that for a moment?
Yes, please.
So what we know from the research is that projects are increasingly complex. The social dynamic, the need for social license, the makeup of the workforce, the multi-time zones that we're working with, social media, for lots and lots of reasons, things have become really complex. And what we know is that to lead these complex initiatives, we need project leaders, project managers, construction managers who have a raft of soft skills. So it's actually those capabilities you've talked about there, the communication, the leadership, the empathy, the conflict resolution, the vision setting, and bringing people along for that journey. That is actually the skill set that's needed into the future. And so, you know, I think that is something that lots of women can really identify with. It's not going to be more engineering that solves the complex problems. It's going to be, you know, interpersonal competency.
And I think if we follow on, so we're talking about the opportunities here and how you guys each got involved in the industry. But Kelly, you were mentioning about people leaving the workforce as you did. I guess if we want to grow the sector, that is one of the things that is, you know, most often I would think cited as a reason for some of these gaps is that women, obviously for caring and raising children, will leave the industry and come back in. More thoughts? I know we've touched on a few of them, or concepts around how we can mitigate that issue.
You're talking about childcare specifically as
No,
a driver to departure?
Just in general, I mean, you know, if we want to grow the sector, the participation of women in the sector, then it's one thing to get women into the sector, and we've touched on whether it's a desire to build things or whether it's awareness that there's opportunities there. But obviously, once they're in, you know, we want to keep people in the industry, and when you see people dropping out for a variety of reasons, we're not going to get that same sort of participation level that we want longer term. So any thoughts on how we can improve or help, or and I know we touched a little bit on it, but any thoughts from the panel?
I've got a couple, if I can start. So there is shift workers, right? There is a shortage of childcare for shift workers. So in Ausgrid, if we have two partners that work in the field, they're both starting anytime from 6 o'clock in the morning. It's the same as the hospitality industry. If you're working at night, there is little childcare if you work outside a traditional 9-to-5 environment. So that doesn't help. Part-time work and the barriers or the perceptions around part-time work. I think we ran some stats and we have only something horrific like 7% of our people working part-time, and I think 99% of those were women. And then there were inconsistencies in our policies around how you could apply for part-time work as well. And most people were actually, once they got a part-time arrangement, they were then staying in the same job, because if they moved managers, they might not get the same part-time opportunities. So there are just simple barriers there too, and I think both Kestrel and Anna mentioned it about flexibility, right? So flexibility, I think, is key to attracting anybody into the workforce. And so on that point, it's not about building an environment that encourages women, just women. It's about building an inclusive and respectful culture through contemporary people policies, while lifting the capability of our leaders as well to manage all those complexities that Kestrel just spoke about as well, right? So I think there is, while we're sort of focused on our female workforce and the experience of our female workforce, there's a bit of a recognition that it's not a one size fit all, but if workplaces are generally building their inclusivity and respectful cultures, then that's going to attract all types of different talent into an industry that's growing, right? And I think there were some stats earlier about the contribution to GDP. So I think that's where I would start. They are not specific barriers to women, I guess. That's
well
yeah.
Surprise.
Well put.
I think that was really well put. And in preparing for this panel, I came across the term temporal flexibility. Flexibility in the time that you do your work, being able to work asynchronously, around care commitments, and the data does suggest that it's when people have caring responsibilities, male or female, that they really value that temporal flexibility. If they don't have it, they'll leave. And I think we do have historical problems with construction, and that 6-day week, first in, last out, that's just not going to work.
Yeah. Anna, I think you had some comments from our earlier discussion.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on the importance of governance and transparency, because for us to be able to drive change, corporations, in particular in construction industry, need to take accountability on the transparency of those KPIs and targets. And the change has to always start from the top. So when we look at the company, we need to understand what is the board combination, what is the executive management team, because that's where the corporate culture flows from. And step by step, those KPIs, they must be tangible. And we must be calling for action within our respective companies or stakeholders for that transparency and accountability.
Yeah. And I think, Anna, you mentioned something when we were talking about childcare hours, some of the structural constraints that are built into society.
Definitely. I think it gets even worse when you move to the school hours, because childcare hours are more generous. And once you move to school, it cuts off more hours of your day. And just based on the social perception, it becomes a woman's responsibility, which is unfair. But that's a broader economic, governmental, societal issue where the schools do have to change as well to accommodate those longer hours to ensure that both parents can be more flexible.
Yeah, no, that really resonated with me. I have a daughter we have 2 grandchildren, and to the extent possible, they share the pickup duties, but it does fall predominantly to my daughter, who's got more flexibility in her job. But that means she's working, Kestrel, to your point. Temporal flexibility means you can, after you put the kids to bed and bath and feed them, you can go to work. So it's a difficult one as well. Maybe, I don't know how much time, we're starting to run a little bit low, but we also talked about some of the future things that are happening and possible impacts on work in general, and not just for women, but we're talking about AI. I think Hester, you had a point on that. And I also wonder about when we talk about job flexibility, COVID allowed everybody to work from home. And now people are pulling their staff back into the office. And is this going to be a long-term positive or negative for what we're talking about today? And again, feel free, anybody on the panel, to go for that one.
Yeah, I'd love to go for that one. So, and I want to echo something that Anna said as well, that, a lot of this conversation does actually need to be about the life side of work life. And when we were partnering with the Women at Work research group at the University of Sydney, this is through WIPN, they had a fascinating study that said in Australia, and this was, going back 2012 to 2013, but at that time, the gender participation in the workforce was 49-51%, so pretty much equal participation. But participation in domestic work was 70-30. And so we were like, that's where the energy is going, and it leads to people who have tired, or because they're doing more of that domestic work. So we came up with a tongue-in-cheek strategy of setting up a national fund for the eradication of ironing, and that would be a practical strategy that would help women at work. But look, some of the AI point. I do think that we need to be careful with, the use of tools like that. AI can be biased depending on what it's fed, and a lot of the roles at the moment at senior level are occupied by a certain archetype, typically male, typically older, typically white. And if that's what the AI is learning, it's those preferences and those needs that leaders need. Well, leaders is not being represented by the community, it's being represented by a subset. So be careful, I suppose, with that. Remote working, I do think, offers that temporal flexibility. And I just maybe, some of the more practical things that anybody could implement in their organisation is being conscious of the practical day-to-day barriers and removing them. So, for example, you want to do professional learning. If somebody's off on maternity leave, they can't engage with that. So if you have it early in the morning or late at night, that's just going to exclude them. So what we did was we had professional learning events with a creche in the room, like at the gym, where you just bring your child and there were toys and you could be with them and still do the professional learning, which also meant that women could gain their CPDs and maintain their certification, because that career gap was meaning it lapsed and then they were less competitive when they came back for work. You can't be what you can't see. So you need to have really good, strong role models of women in leadership and make them obvious to people. Women were so time poor that they weren't nominating themselves for awards. So we nominated them, partly so that they would be helped, those individuals, but partly so that other women would see women on the stage getting awards and know that can be me, that can be a path for me. And also, promoting them through your regular comms, making sure that that whenever you are planning an event, that you're just thinking through what are those practical barriers for people.
Anyone else on the panel have something to add to that?
I sort of think that sometimes, it sounds a bit strange to say, are we doing enough as employers to actually train our managers about how to offer and encourage flexibility? You can sit there and say, well, we shouldn't need to, surely everyone would understand and know that that's the right thing to do. And because I think there's very rarely an intent to create a barrier. But we hear endlessly that that's how women are experiencing it. But I don't actually see, although correct me if other panel members, have got great examples, but I haven't really seen employers actually training their leaders, their managers to say, are you having the questions? Are you, organising your meetings at times that support those that are working flexibly? Are you thinking about these things? Because sometimes it's just, simple awareness, and once you bring it to people's awareness, they can factor it in and work with it. So it may be just unconscious, and again, I'm not trying to make excuses about why barriers exist, but those are things that, we should be reflecting on as employers. Can we actually help people see how they may unconsciously be creating barriers and difficulties?
Anything else? Yeah, I think you've been a naughty panel because we jumped ahead to obstacles in this one, so that's okay. So I'll put you on notice that I've got a few things I've noted down here on the call to action, but at the end of the question period, and I will give you a heads up, I think we've used flexibility about 18 times. So I think that's number one on the list, but if there are anything else when we do the wind up, you can come back in terms of a call to action. Abhi, are we looking at questions? I don't want to steal the podium too long. Are there any questions there, or do we keep going?
This is great, Dennis. Like there's one question, a couple of reflections. So I'll go through that. But I'm so tempted because I'm so impressed by Kestrel's grandmother's story. So I'll add a bit of a story if the time permits. So I was born in India, and my mother left her job. She did a bachelor's in political science, left her job when I was born. So I regret it till today, right? Like she left her job when I was born. And I quickly realized, so my dad was working. I always thought he was the smartest, so I used to go to him with maths. As soon as I turned into year 8, year 9, year 10 maths, every time my mom used to solve those maths for me. And then after my year 11th, when she was doing the calculus and everything, she got to teaching again. So she was solving questions for my classmates, and she started her teaching career after I got into year 10. So I'm really proud of that, and I have a daughter as well. I tell her this all the time, so inspire her to get into STEM. So yeah. Anyway, I'll get into the first question. This is it's quite a reflection and a question. Is the woman's responsibility for childcare changing due to the generational differences? I have male friends within brackets Gen X who have taken on this role compared to my mother's generation, baby boomers.
I'm happy to jump in and have a first go at that. I mean, I have to say, you know, when you are working in a senior role like I was, you know, as chief executive, you know, there to a degree, whilst in some ways I had ultimate say, you know, am I coming to work today or not? The reality is I had to be there and pretty much, you know, work long days. But my, you know, I couldn't have done that without an incredibly supportive, you know, partner. So it's a long way of basically saying I think there is a change happening. I think I do see more and more men who see it as equal responsibility. And, you know, to be fair to my husband, he did, you know, way more than the 50%. You know, I was, you know, not in my most recent role, but, you know, I was, you know, in previous sort of chief operating officer type roles, I was having to spend, you know, 3 nights a week out in the gas fields, you know, but for my husband, you know, being willing to stay and kind of carry the full load, you know, while I was away. So I think there is a change happening, and I see it in the workplace as well. I'm seeing flexible work arrangement requests coming in from the younger lads, you know, those that are recently married and want flexibility to support their partner's career, you know, flexibility to do childcare as well. So, and kudos to those guys. And whilst sometimes I used to feel a little bit, I don't know what the word is, but a little bit weird about sort of championing that, you know, I didn't want to kind of give them all the plaudits, you know, but being able to sort of kind of make a bit of a splash about it, more to advertise it, to actually show other people in the workforce, you know, here is balance, and here is somebody, you know, here is somebody who is showing that they do see that it is their responsibility to share, you know, caring responsibilities with their partner.
So I'll add to that one, Rebecca, as well, and I might try and get you some data as well. But our chief people officer the other day mentioned that there is evidence coming out that the more often or willingly men take parental leave and spend effectively quality time with their babies and their young children, leads to them taking on more of the mental load throughout the child's actual development in early childhood. So it's not just about those, it's not just about parental leave at the early stages, but it's actually the fact that that benefits the family really as a whole as well. But I was in a similar situation to you, also Gen X. My husband effectively had a more flexible career, and so he became the primary child carer after I sort of took extended parental leave and then came back to work, and we have managed that as a family, but I couldn't have had the career that I've had without his support. He was lucky in that he had 2 of his peers from university. Both, one was a vet and one had a very good career in media. They both took on that role for their wives as well. So in a cohort of only sort of 6 or 8 university colleagues, at least about half of them were taking on the primary childcare responsibilities.
I wanted thank you to add to that as well. So firstly, the question which is interesting is what is actually driving the generational change, if that's just the social norms or actually the fact that we are putting policies in place and we're changing things, they are driving that generational change. And we can do even better, because I think where the utopical brilliant future is where we don't need other partner to support another partner, whatever the gender is, but where both partners can be pursuing careers without any limitations, and essentially have infrastructure around them that supports it and have sufficient flexibility for both of them. So I think that's the next step for the next generations, where we move to where we are comfortable, where, for example, men is supporting a woman, but the next step for us is where both partners can be pursuing those careers without the need for support of each other.
Good point. Very good. Abhi,
Can I bring in something really big that we haven't touched on? I'm really conscious of time, but I think it's relevant to this topic of, the generations and equality in domestic caregiving roles. And I think it's the pay gap, which doesn't mean women getting different pay for the same work. That is behind us. It's legislated. It is illegal to pay people different rates for the same job. We're talking about the median salary of men versus women, and what it indicates, the fact that we have these pay gaps, they're now published and interesting reading on ABC News. But what it refers to is that more men are getting higher paid roles than women are. So women are getting more of the junior, low-paying roles because they're trading off for that flexibility we talked about. And if you look within the family, who's going to take the time out of the workforce? The domestic economic drivers there is going to be whoever gets paid the least is the one that stops working to look after the kids and whatever other care responsibilities you have. So I think once the conversation about equality at home is going to go with the conversation around the pay gap.
Yeah, no, I think that's quite right. And I think we've had 2 demonstrations. I don't know if I could put words in your mouth about who was earning more or less, but career flexibility enables one partner to carry on. And I think just if you want to generalize, it's typically the male that is earning more. So yes, the woman typically stays home, and you just perpetuate the situation longer term. Abhi, are there any more questions, or can I throw it? Oh, okay.
There is one question.
I want to make sure the panel gives me some call to action points now.
Okay, let's get into the call to action then, and I'll take a call to action as well at the end. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go to the call to action.
Yeah, and maybe before you guys get put on the spot, and like I said, I think flexibility, getting that, it wouldn't be work-life balance. What did you say? The work-life mush? Mush.
Yeah.
So mushy.
I'm from a generation where, I went to work and my wife raised the kids, and my son's first birthday, I was on a business trip in Europe, and I missed all of those things. So, I wouldn't have minded some of that balance myself. But for what it's worth, I was at a board meeting today where the CEO was a woman. I'm not sure, I didn't do a count, but a very good representation of the board were women. And the last 3 interactions that I've had with senior individuals in the rail and public transport industry have all been senior women. So that's something I could not have said, I think, even 10 or 15 years ago. So there is progress being made. So is there anything that you guys think we should say, like if we had our KPIs, if it gets measured, it gets done, what should we be doing so that we don't have flowers and chocolates next year as well, and say that we've gone up 0.3% on some index? Although I did see that Australia's 26th on the list of some index that I wasn't familiar with until today. So I guess that's good. New Zealand was 4th on the same index. So
I'll offer a couple of things. I mean, I think, Dennis, you're right. I mean, what gets measured gets, gets attention basically, and gets discussed and changed. And you know, in talking about the gender pay gap report, you know, and what Kestrel was saying, I think I saw somewhere that because the UK has been reporting that gender pay gap since back, I think it was 2017, the UK has already noticed that gender pay gap is closing at quite a rapid rate. So I think Australia's on that journey now, which is fantastic. We've just got to keep eyes on it and keep visibility. So therein, the call to action is within our own companies. We should be looking at the data in our own organisation and taking steps, you know, to find out how can we encourage women to stay in those more technical roles. You know, you heard, say, Qantas, you know, who, you know, and Virgin and the other airlines who said, well, it's just a factor of, you know, the women aren't doing the engineering roles. So that's why we've got this huge pay gap. It's because, you know, so, you know, we've really got to challenge ourselves to bring women into those technical and more higher paid roles and encourage them to stay there. And again, coming back to a point I made earlier, you know, I think anything that businesses can do to offer the right mentoring, role models, coaching, to get you know, women to see themselves in that roles and for them to feel confident to explore their potential in those roles is so important.
Excellent. Any other contributions?
So I've got one, Dennis, around the pipeline and recruitment. And it's been spoken about for a long time, but it's the tone of the ads, it's the criteria that we're asking for, it's the language that's used in the ads. If you think about, if you rewrote some of those ads with the language Rebecca used about her value that she brought into those engineering situations, that language would simply attract more people. So we've been reporting our recruitment statistics here for a while about how many women and men are applying for jobs, how many are translating through to interviews, and how many are translating through to appointments, just so that we can see if there are any unconscious bias coming through in that metrics. But a big shout out to one of my colleagues who was in a position where he knew he had gender imbalance, and he waited 6 months. He went back to market 4 times because he knew he could get the right person. He knew he could get a woman who had the right skills for the job that he needed, and he was prepared to wait. And he has waited 6 months, and we have just appointed a woman into that role. And so that's the type of action that we need.
Yeah. Anna?
Thank you, Dennis. I would, my call for action is that we continue to actively look for the cause of the problem versus trying to cure the symptoms. And maybe one of the examples is that a lot of major corporations a number of years ago started offering fertility preservation programs at a corporate cost to women, which is in itself is a great initiative. But if we look at it from a broader perspective, it actually cures the symptom, where it pushes women to stay in workforce and, for example, have children later, instead of creating arrangements at work of equality and comfort and flexibility. So it's ongoingly challenging ourselves always of what is the cause and how we can make the situation better versus curing the outputs and statistics.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else?
I think I would just encourage everyone to remember that you can't be what you can't see. So find women who are doing things that you feel are outside your reach, and be inspired and have a go, stretch yourself, get outside your comfort zone, and make sure others see you doing that, because they can't be what they can't see.
Yeah. And I think mentors, both male and female, have been talked about quite extensively in all of our discussions. So I think that's very important that we have those role models, those mentors to help us through those, to navigate it. Questions, Abhi? Have we exhausted the? As I said, I just don't want to steal all the time. If people are looking to have a a comment or a question?
There's quite a bit of comments and reflections happening, but I think we have covered most of it. In terms of, I just want to share a story. About 8 years back, I got into management consulting, and management consulting has a good culture of feedback. And I had my boss, and she was one of the best bosses I have worked for. It was the first time I had a boss who was a lady, and she gave me really good feedback. And I remember I used to travel to Canberra. We used to travel to Canberra together on a Monday morning flight, and this was one of the performance meetings I was having. And I struggled. I used to struggle to say no to things, right? So I was committing on a lot of different things, and we were having bacon and egg roll, and she said that you are like the egg, which is involved in this but not committed. I want you to be the bacon, right? So
did it work?
So I can definitely say that I'll be more committed on this on behalf of Engineers Australia, and getting this membership and involvement of women in STEM as careers in engineering. That's one of the things that I'll be committed about.
So we will put you under the spotlight next year when we do this, and we'll get those stats and see how well you've done in 12 months'
Absolutely.
time. Yeah,
I take that challenge.
Okay, so I think maybe to summarize some of the things that we should be doing, we've talked about the need for measurement, and if something is not measured, and that was a good example, I guess, what I just gave with Abhi. Set the tone for things, the pipeline to bring people in, the criteria that we have in our ads, that we look at it with this lens on, and as compared to what we've done before. Look at the cause of some of these things rather than the quick and dirty solutions, and the importance of mentors and people that we can look at for example and leadership in the field. And again, going back to what I said, I think there's a lot more people out there now that we can point to and can say that, look, this is what's possible. And I think to summarize just about everything that we've talked about, it's coming back to flexibility for both the men and the women in the workforce to get that life work mush together so that we don't compare which one is giving up their career, but the structure is there to support both to have good careers and meaningful families. I don't know if anybody's got anything else you'd like to say before we close this one down. I am closing it, Abhi. Is that right, by the way?
Yeah, thank you, Dennis.
I've never done a webinar before, just for the record.
Thank you, Dennis.
When do we run out of time? You can just shut the
computer when you want to leave. So, and no, thank you, Dennis.
Well, I do have a flight to catch.
Thank you all. I think it was a fantastic session, and I would like to thank Dennis, Anna, Kestrel, Kelly, and Rebecca. Thank you so much for your time. I really want to thank you on behalf of Engineers Australia and Project Controls Expo. And we'll definitely keep in touch, and we'll get to some of the measurements next year.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abhi. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Cheers.